You know what 420 is, right?
Yeah, it's code for adults who still watch cartoons.
I do not understand who this show is for. Hi everyone, my name is Scott. I love Scooby-Doo stuff. I make a bunch of Scooby-Doo videos over here, and then occasionally I also make videos that I pour my heart and soul into, but those don't get views, so here I am. The first 2 episodes of the new HBO Max Velma series just dropped yesterday, and normally it takes me a really long time to make videos. I'm not one to just rush out and make something and post it like a day or two after. I mean, I'm literally in the middle of moving right now. I've got stuff in boxes. I'm supposed to be packing even more stuff tonight. I'm not even supposed to be making a video right now. But I have a lot to say about this series so far. So this is going to be sort of a messy video. I didn't write a full script. I mean, as you can see, I really didn't put a lot of effort into anything. I figured if the show wasn't going to, then why should I? I'm being a little harsh. I know that some people really like this show so far, and I don't want to yuck on anyone's yum. So in the spirit of Scooby-Doo, in the spirit of not wanting to be overly negative, I thought I would tackle all of my thoughts in a structure of a compliment sandwich. And in this case, it's going to be a sandwich with a lot of layers of bread and very few actual sandwich ingredients, which are the good parts. I have a lot more bad stuff to say. It's probably a sandwich that Scooby and Shaggy would skip, which is unprecedented. There's like a million sirens going on right now. Am I not supposed to be making this video? First bad thing, the opening scene of this show. So the show starts off with Daphne in a locker room with other friends, other school students. They're in high school. I want to remind you that they are teenagers, because the show opens up with a bunch of teenagers naked in a locker room. And look, I do not want to hash out how they're just drawings and they're not real or whatever. I'm just saying that to me, personally, it was uncomfortable. I watched the first episode live on my Discord, which you can get by supporting me on Patreon. Go check it out.
My name.
All right. We got to do like an...
What's her name?
We gotta know
What is
her name.
I need
gotta
to
know her name. Literally, as soon as the show started, people were getting so uncomfortable, myself included, that people were just leaving. They were like, I don't want to watch Scott watch this. I am Scott. I don't want to watch this. And they try to get around it, right? They try to like call it out as some sort of meta commentary, like, oh, you know how like a lot of pilot episodes of TV shows have a lot of gratuitous like nudity and violence in the pilot episode because it's supposed to get the audience's attention, shake things up a little bit. But also, like, what is the commentary here? I genuinely don't get it. They're just doing the thing that they are. It's not a commentary. It's at best it's lampshading, trying to excuse the fact that they are doing the thing that they're trying to critique. But there really isn't any critique other than like, have you noticed that this thing happens sometimes? Think about that. And we're going to get into this a little bit more, but there's a lot of messages in this show that like are so close to saying something, anything, and they whiff so bad. But I can't go into it because it's a compliment sandwich. I do have to say a nice thing. So here's my first nice thing. I really do like the casting of this show a lot. I knew I would love Sam Richardson from the get-go. Absolutely brilliant. The man crushes it in everything he does. I was not expecting to, I love Glenn Howerton, but I wasn't expecting to love him as Fred as much as I do. There are moments in the second episode where he brings out that sort of like rage that he's known for in It's Always Sunny. And he's also like, he's putting on a bit of a voice too, which is, I thought he was just going to do his own normal voice, but he is trying to like age himself down a little bit by having like a more higher pitched sort of voice. And I don't mind it. I think a lot of his moments as Fred in this series are really funny. I do think Mindy Kaling does a good job with voice acting as Velma. I think the character of Velma not great. We'll get into it. But I do think the standout casting for me is obviously Sam Richardson. As I said, his portrayal of Shaggy or Norval in this series is, I think, one of the most inspired, because all these other previous incarnations of Shaggy allude to the fact that he's like a stoner. His version of Shaggy is very like straight-laced, like I would never do drugs. Drugs are bad. And those parts, they get a good chuckle out of me just because they do feel like the jokes that are for fans of Scooby-Doo, and they're not trying to insult the characters, but really just sort of riff off of what people might know them for. They also kept a lot of Shaggy's like classic character traits, like he loves to eat, He's a little scaredy cat. You love to see it. But unfortunately, I think those moments are quickly overshadowed by the parts of the show that just outwardly insult the audience. To give you an example, I showed you the clip earlier where Shaggy is like, boy, I hope I never get into 420 or 420 culture. Then he turns to Velma and is like, do you know what 420 is? And she says something like, yeah, it's code for adults who still watch cartoons. And it's like, how can you have those two jokes back to back? The Shaggy joke is like playing into that nostalgia that people who do like Scooby-Doo cartoons might be wanting to see and might be appreciative to be like, oh, this is an interesting joke. It's an interesting take on the character. I thought it was really funny. And then immediately pans to Velma, who is like, anyway, adults who watch cartoons are bad and annoying. I don't know what the joke there is other than she just doesn't like them. Again, we're going to get into Velma's character traits, flaws, mostly flaws. We're going to get into that in a little bit. That exchange just left me wondering the whole time, like, who is this show for? It's definitely not an all ages cartoon. Adults have to watch your cartoon. It's not for kids. Need I remind you of the opening scene? There's a lot more where that came from. But then you get those jokes that feel like they are for specifically people who are nostalgic Scooby-Doo fans, and then they insult you for it. In some ways, to me, it does feel like Warner Brothers Discovery is using the Velma show to try and like critique the idea of having animation on their platform. Like, not only are there jokes like that insult the viewers of the show, but there's also like a part at the very beginning of the first episode that feels like it was insulting the Harley Quinn show. Sparta doesn't know what to do with himself right now. Even he's freaking out. So like before the uncomfortable shower scene, right? The first episode starts with a voiceover from Velma saying that like, this is my origin story, which already I don't understand, because as you continue to watch the first two episodes, you realize that no, actually there's a bunch of stuff that we as an audience have not seen. It's stuff that's already happened and has already informed Velma's character, and you would consider that to be a part of her origin story, but we missed it. So, but then Velma's voiceover specifically calls out that like most origin stories are about like men who are already powerful and want more power, which is like, that's a fine critique. But then she says that if there are origin stories about women, it's about how, quote, like how this hot chick became crazy or whatever, which to me feels like a reference to Harley Quinn, another Warner Brothers animation. Like, do they just hate they're trying to use animation to kill their own animation department? But also, I don't know if that line was meant to be a joke in the way that it was. Like, if they were trying to call out Harley Quinn, that's one thing. But also, this show that is not supposed to be like that. It's not supposed to be like all those other origin stories. It's not like those other girls. This show is about discovering a mystery to why Velma is having panic-induced hallucinations. Is that not an origin story of a woman who is going through some mental struggle? Like, they're the same thing. This sandwich is getting too bready. I gotta say something nice again. There are a handful of moments in these first two episodes where the visual humor did get some genuine chuckles out of me. The book titles that Velma has on her shelves, they're pretty funny. But I think for me, the scene in episode 2 where they're just like rushing past all these school clubs has a lot of very good visual jokes in the background and even in the foreground. I like the idea of having a debate club and then a better debate club. I just think that's really funny. And then there's a bit where they're going by like an archery club and it cuts to Daphne having an arrow through her head. But it's not a real arrow. It's one that just it's like a prank. It's supposed to look like it because there's also a practical joke club. That right there is a joke I would expect to see in something like What's New Scooby-Doo, right? That would fit in perfectly just in a Scooby-Doo cartoon. And it worked. And for me, it works. That being said, most of the other humor of this show is, I don't want to say it's not good. It's not for me. It's not for me. It's not humor that I personally enjoy. See, I'm like pulling back. I felt myself being too mean and being too negative earlier. I'm pulling back. I'm trying to be a little bit nicer. So yeah, the humor's not for me. Most of the jokes either fall flat entirely for me or they're completely overbearing. They also just feel like relics of a TV show that was made in the early 2000s, which was 20 years ago. I don't like saying it, but it's true. There's a lot of like vernacular in here that is extremely millennial, and I'm a millennial, but this feels like elderly millennial. They're not even jokes, really. It's just the way that people talk is like, yes, people in their late 30s wrote this. Obviously, comedy is subjective. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. If you like it, that's great. But we do have a small problem with my compliment sandwich idea, which is that I am running dangerously low on compliments. So since we're about halfway through this compliment sandwich, I figured it would be a great time for me to throw out some not positive things, not negative things, some extremely neutral things, some feelings, not even feelings, some things that I observed. I've talked about this a lot in previous videos. I have no problem with them changing races or sexualities of any of these characters. I feel like the Scooby-Doo cast is incredibly malleable. And if you think that any member of Mystery Inc. has ever been straight, you're wrong. You're just wrong. Another thing that I'm very neutral on is the fact that there are tons of Easter eggs and like references to other Scooby-Doo stuff in this show. If they were trying to court me with those references and try to make me like the show more, they failed. Because yeah, there are things where a character say, I would have gotten away with it if not, blah, blah, blah. All of these usernames on screen are references that I enjoy. There's a lot of drug use in this show, and pretty much all of the drugs are references to the gang's catchphrases like Jinkies and Jeepers and Zoinks. And there are also some Scooby-Doo alums that bring back their voice for this show. Frank Welker, the original and consistent voice actor for Fred, is now Fred's father. I love when they do that sort of thing. I believe he played Fred's uncle in A Pup Named Scooby-Doo. Gary Cole is back in the Scoob universe. Kimberly Brooks, who played Luna in Witch's Ghost, plays like a sort of like disheveled stoner girl or something in one of the episodes. There's a lot of stuff like that. Some of them are more creative than others. There are wanted posters here in the police station that are just images of ghosts from the classic cartoon for seemingly no reason other than to say, hey, you see that? That one's for you. But that's sort of the reason why I put all of these Easter eggs in the neutral category. It doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't enhance the overall plot of the show or really my enjoyment at all, other than being like, I recognize that thing. Anyway, and the last thing that I'm just sort of neutral on is sort of the most damning, which is the plot as a whole, the mystery at the center of this series. It's not super interesting. So episode 1 starts with this murder of one of their classmates, and her brains are missing. Her head was cut open, her brains are missing. And the episode ends that sort of same way. They find another classmate whose head was cut open, their brains are missing. And throughout the first 2 episodes, we're really just sort of evaluating suspects, not really gathering too many clues. The clues that we do gather are sort of brushed off as, oh, actually that's tied to something else, which is fine. But it's just in the 2 episodes that you could help to build this mystery, I'm not really, it hasn't grabbed me yet. Like, yes, there are murdered classmates, but I didn't know those classmates. One of them, we just don't even know before they're dead. I don't even know if we know the second one before they're dead. They're just dead. They're just corpses, right? But then there's this other mystery as well of like what happened to Velma's mother. She's missing. Is that tied into anything at all? Why is Velma having these hallucinations? What's causing them? What does it mean? But it's... See, this is my issue, right? The hallucinations don't feel like anything to me. They just sort of feel like a way to halt the plot once we're starting to pick up even a little bit and start uncovering a little bit more of the mystery. Velma will have a hallucination, which will mean that she can't further investigate anything and no one else can really do anything either. So it's like, what's the point? It's more frustrating than it is fascinating, which I do think could also be a good tagline for this show in general. So I know that sounds like I was being negative, but remember that was my neutral category. Hello.
Hello.
I'm finishing up What are your thoughts about the Velma show? Here, you take my chair.
I take your chair.
You're the new star of the channel.
Unscripted thoughts on Velma is it feels like it would be better if it wasn't based around Scooby-Doo characters. Even better, thank you. It feels like the characters that they have on this show don't even feel really inspired by the Scooby-Doo IP. And so they bring out these extremely negative qualities about them. And I don't know, it's only 2 episodes. Like maybe they're like trying to propel them in arcs and things and give them a little bit of direction to go with growth. But it just feels like they're just so hateful to each other and like not fun. And it doesn't bring a lot of joy to the series. And for an IP that for pretty much its entirety has been based around like friendship and loyalty and working together and being a team. It doesn't feel like it cares about any of those kind of qualities, and it makes it difficult to root for. Like, I don't know who the audience for this show is. She certainly didn't really feel like female positive at any point in the show. She didn't really feel positive towards any character in the show. Like, she's really hateful towards Norval. She's really antagonistic towards pretty much every female character other than her mom. Like, she's really hateful to her dad's girlfriend for like no discernible reason other than she's like maybe chuggy. I mean, like, I wouldn't be friends with this Velma. I'd be friends with a lot of other Velmas. Okay, that's it.
Can you tell people to like and subscribe?
Please like and subscribe. Please watch our video about Whisper of the Heart.
Please watch our video about Whisper of the Heart.
Worked really hard on it.
We both did. Emily worked really hard on it, and also I did.
Sometimes.
I'm back. Like I said, we're in the process of moving right now, so I did have to get up and do things other than this. There's lots of packing and painting, and my current landlord got a flat tire, so he made me show this apartment to the people who might replace me here, like it's my job. And then when I did sit down earlier to record the second half of this review, I didn't have my microphone on. So that was really depressing, and I did spend some time stress eating peanut butter, but I think I'm back now, and it's given me time to ruminate on my thoughts about this show. And I'm so frustrated by this cartoon. I feel like I am stuck between a rock and a hard place for this show. Right? Like, I've made several videos about the show before it came out, trying so hard to be optimistic and hopeful that maybe it might be good. I wanted to combat some of those like early toxic hate videos about the show. And I did go into these 2 episodes genuinely wanting to like it. I'm a Scooby-Doo fan. I love Scooby-Doo. I make videos about that dog as often as I think people will tolerate. I've said it before and I stand by it. I do think Scooby-Doo is a very malleable franchise. You can do a lot to experiment with the formula, experiment with the characters, change things up. Be creative. And if you like this show, if you like Velma, then honestly, that's great. And I'm so glad that I'm genuinely so happy that you like this show. I just don't think it's particularly good. And normally I would just leave it there. I wouldn't even make a video about it. But I'm here because I feel like I have to be. As I alluded to, the loudest, most annoying people on the internet have also latched onto this show and have also come to the conclusion that it's bad, but the way they got to that conclusion is wrong. I mean, this cartoon, right, that was about hippie youths in the 60s encouraging skepticism and defeating greedy capitalists, they took that concept and they made it political. They made Scooby-Doo woke now. It's too progressive. It's too woke. Like, is it though? Because I'm a little lefty boy, and I gotta tell you, there were moments of this show that I really genuinely thought they were going to say something. They were going to have some sort of commentary, some sort of criticism, some critique of the modern landscape, and then they fumble it so bad. Let me give you an example, and this was like the most infuriating part of the series to me so far. Again, we're only 2 episodes in. Things could get worse. So in the first episode, we get to know Fred a little bit, but he's definitely like holding stuff back, right? He's afraid to show emotions. He feels like it's very wimpy to have feelings. He feels all this pressure from his dad to be this very like hyper masculine, sort of like manly man.
I am real! A real man, father!
So there are elements here that feel like it might touch on a little bit of like toxic masculinity, right? This is something that Scooby-Doo Monsters Unleashed did that I think is really good as well. There's like a whole mini arc in that movie where Fred has these similar thoughts, right? He thinks talking is for wimps. He doesn't want to show his emotions. He wants to just do stuff, right? He's all about doing, not talking, not feeling. And then he has to come to terms with that actually, no, it's okay to express yourself. It's okay to feel feelings, you know? In fact, later in that episode of Velma, we even see that Fred has like perfectly smooth legs. And like, I thought, okay, maybe this is, he's keeping it secret from people because that's not a traditionally masculine thing to do, to like shave your legs. And maybe he just likes the way that it feels, but he's embarrassed to share that with people. And he has to come to terms with, expressing himself and being himself in his own skin. Forget about what his dad thinks that a man should be. Fred has his own ideas of who he wants to be, and he wants to explore that. And I thought all of this that I'm saying is stuff that the show doesn't do, but I was like projecting like, okay, I can see where some good messaging might be in here. And then in the second episode, Fred is accused of murdering the other classmates at his school. And then the show, again, it's so close to doing something. Fred's entire legal defense is basically they're trying to convince the public that he couldn't have possibly murdered those girls because, well, he's just a sweet little boy. And you can sort of see where there could be something there where it's a commentary about how the media portrays white male criminals as like, oh, they're young. They've made mistakes. We've all made mistakes. Yes, he brutally murdered two of his classmates, but like, we've all been young before. We've all been foolish little children. And look at how sweet he is, and look at how cute he is. It's so close. It's so close to anything. But nope, throw all of that out the window, because the real reason that's revealed to us why Fred couldn't possibly have murdered his classmates, the real reason why he has all of these emotions, he's overly emotional. And even the real reason he has smooth legs still, why not? They're all connected, and it's a very funny reason, and it's gonna bust you up when I tell you. It's gonna be so good. You ready for this one? It's very good. It's very funny. The reason for all of those things, you see, is because Fred has Fred has a small ding dong. His penis is small. It's so tiny. He's got a tiny little willy, and that's why. And that's the joke. It's the funny joke. It's pretty good. Let's see if we can line it up here. Where's our guy? Gonna need him. Just gonna move the magnify. Oh, there it is. Gotta zoom in because it's so small. So can you like understand my frustration a little bit here? People might be shouting that this show is like overly woke and progressive, but like, did we watch the same show? I mean, just like isolating that whole scenario with Fred feels like it has some like body shaming stuff. It has some like puberty shaming thing. I don't even know if that's a real thing, but it feels like it is thanks to this show, because the whole thing with Fred is that he hasn't gone through puberty yet, and everyone's like making fun of him for it. Here I was thinking I was going to get an interesting commentary on toxic masculinity and how guys sometimes feel like they're not allowed to express their emotions because it's not masculine enough. It's like too childish. And here's this show literally saying, yeah, no, it is childish. And Fred feels his feelings because he's a baby. And we should laugh at him for that. That's just one example from this show. And I have to move on because I realize that I've sort of forgotten my premise of making a compliment sandwich, and I've inserted an entire loaf of bread into this sandwich right into the middle. All filler, no killer. So I will say my final good thing about this show, which is that I do think the animation style and the art style, I think the show is really pretty. I think it looks really good. I really like the retro looking backdrops of the show. That sort of painted feel to them is very OG Scooby-Doo. The show has a really vibrant and eerie color palette with lots of purples and greens that I enjoy. And just, overall, the animation is fine, right? Like, I don't have any beef with the animators. There are some scenes in here, like notably the hallucination scenes with Velma, that feel really intense, like heart pounding. The way that they animate the fingers like going into Velma's face and her heart like ripping out. It is really intense. And I think we're also supposed to view, finding the dead bodies of their classmates with their brains missing. Like that is supposed to be a very shocking, brutal scene. And I do think all of that would be fine and good if the show didn't also use a lot of violence and gore for like comedy, There's a part where Fred cuts off a student's leg in the middle of the school and he's just like bleeding out in the hallway. And it's like played for laughs. Like everyone just sort of ignores him and moves on. Even there's a kid bleeding out in the hallway. And then later in episode 2, they run into that same kid again and his leg comes off again and it's bleeding and they just sort of skip past it. I just wish they would pick one or the other way. Like, is it supposed to be funny? Is it supposed to be shocking? It's hard for me to know what I'm supposed to be feeling right now. At this point, our sandwich is pretty big. I need to close it up with one final piece of bread. And it's the bread that people have baked for me the most. That metaphor got away from me real quick, huh? So there's a part of the show that I've seen people be really split on, and that is of our titular character, Velma. Is Velma supposed to be likable? So here are my thoughts. There are some people who think that Velma is intentionally not supposed to be a likable character. There are plenty of shows like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia or Succession where the characters are you're not supposed to like them, right? You're really supposed to root against them as they fight against each other, as they fail their way trying to accomplish something that's, you don't want them to accomplish, whatever it is. The fun part of the show is these characters are terrible and you're watching them fail and it's fun. I really love Scott Pilgrim, but it's mostly because I enjoy the fantasy of an awful person apologizing to his friends and then leaving them alone forever. And there are swords in it, which, to be fair, that is also true of Velma. And so some people believe that Velma falls into this category. She is a character in this show who is unlikable, and that's on purpose. We are not supposed to like Velma. I disagree. It goes back to what I was just saying. If you have an intentionally unlikable character, the fun part about that is rooting against them. But in this show, we're not supposed to root against Velma. We're supposed to root for her. We're supposed to want her to uncover the mystery behind, what happened to her mom. We're supposed to want her to overcome these hallucinations that she's having. It's an origin story where the whole premise is Velma is the one that got the gang together, right? That's literally what they say at the beginning of the first episode. And I want that. We want that, right? We want Velma to succeed in solving mysteries and bringing her friends together. Like we're rooting for her and for everyone. At least I feel like we're supposed to be rooting for them based off of everything else in the show. So it makes it hard when you have a main character who is just mean, just so cruel to everyone around her, everyone who is even supportive of her, everyone who is her friend, everyone who loves her. It's just... Velma is just mean. There's no other way to put it. She's just a mean person. And again, that's fine. You can have shows where the main characters are mean, but just don't ask me to root for them. I'm not gonna. And I feel like on some level, I do understand why they did this with Velma, why they made her so abrasive towards other people. And it really just goes to like the archetype of Velma being the smart one, the know-it-all. And I do think we tend to associate that type of character with being maybe a little harsh, a little mean. They're fed up with other people around them who aren't as smart as they are. But that wasn't always true with Velma, right? In the original cartoon, Velma was smart for sure, but she never got frustrated with the people around her when they didn't know something that she knew. She was excited to share her knowledge with the group because she liked her friends, Later interpretations of the character do start to build on that sort of abrasiveness of Velma being the intellect of Mystery Incorporated. In Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, there are moments of the show where Velma does come across as very almost annoying sometimes, antagonistic towards everyone else because she's smarter than they are and she's frustrated that they're not on her level. And as a viewer, I'll be honest, it did get a little grating sometimes watching those episodes, but the show as a whole made it serve a point, right? Because as more supernatural, paranormal stuff starts happening, Velma, the smart one, the know-it-all, the person who has this more rational understanding of the world than everyone else, is coming to contact with things that are deeply irrational and has to come to terms with the fact that the things she thinks she knows about reality and existence and the natural world are just wrong. And that initial abrasiveness serves that overall character arc in that show. But in this show, in Velma on HBO, I mean, I don't know, I guess there is a little bit of that, right? Like there's a point in episode 2 where Velma is incredibly judgmental to everyone around her, including Daphne, and then she realizes that she might have pegged Daphne wrong, which is a very funny sentence to say, knowing what happens at the end of episode 2. But it does sort of raise like the bigger question though, right? The reason why Velma is so judgmental of other people is because she's the smart one, right? She knows everyone better than they know themselves, So they sort of wave off that as a character trait for smart people. Smart people are judgmental, which I don't know if that's true, but also, is Velma smart, though? I don't think she's done anything in the show so far that would demonstrate that she's smarter than anyone else. Like, they even make a point to say that she copies off of Norval's math homework.
And I don't want to do our math homework together. Just email me your answers like always.
So, like, he's smarter, right? He's the smart one. But you know what? I did forget. Velma does wear glasses, and she owns books. And so she's that makes her a genius. Wait a minute, I'm wearing glasses and I have books. Maybe I'm a genius. I've been a genius this whole time. Maybe this show is for geniuses. It's at this point I regret to inform you that there are 2 times in the pilot episode where Velma's glasses fall off of her face and she just puts them back on like it's nothing. She just puts them back on. This show doesn't understand the characters they're working with. There's no respect for history here. Which leads me, I think, to my final point, which I guess would be like the olive on a toothpick that we would put on top of this compliment sandwich now that it's done. Why is this a Scooby-Doo show? That's a question that I've been asked a lot online and offline. People I just know in real life have asked me this face to face. Why is Velma a Scooby-Doo show? I think the answer is pretty obvious, right? Like, they just wanted to capitalize on well-known IP. If Mindy Kaling and friends wanted to make a show that was similar to this, but with wholly original characters, it probably would not have been greenlit, especially with all the chaos that's happening at Warner's Discovery right now and their animation department as a whole. But I do just want to say, in a slight defense of this show, there have been other Scooby-Doo cartoons that, in my opinion, did not need to be Scooby-Doo cartoons. This is not the first time that this has happened. And I feel like maybe I will make a video about that in the future, so subscribe if you want to check that out. But what I will say about those shows in comparison to this one is that all of those ones had the dog in it. The dog was in those shows. Where's the dog? And I know that there have been plenty of awful, awful TV shows made by straight white men. So I fully subscribe to the idea that everyone else is also allowed to make bad art. Let people make bad stuff. I'm a white guy. I'm not straight, but still, I'm out here making a really messy YouTube video right now. I would not care at all about this TV show if it wasn't tied to the Scooby-Doo IP, but unfortunately it is. So here I am. Like I said, I streamed my reaction watching the first episode of this show on my Discord, which you can get access to on Patreon. I'm also going to throw the recording of that reaction up on Patreon and on Nebula. Links to everything in the description, including my Whisper of the Heart video that I did last week. We put our heart and soul into that video. It's one of the best videos I've ever made, and it didn't get a lot of views because it's not a topic I typically talk about, but please check it out. It would mean the world to me if you would just give it a watch. Okay, bye-bye.